1. The place I work makes servers plate and garnish food. Try to stay with me. One window has fried items, another window has grill, another has broil. Burgers, sandwiches on the bottom bun come up in grill window. Top buns come up in broil window. Servers plate it all. We prepare our soups, mashed veg, drawn, butter, au jus, marinara 85% of the time because cooks don't do it. We prepare our own salads. They cook the meat and it comes up in the grill window. We prepare all the ice cream desserts. We prepare 95% of condiments and sides, on top of all the waiter duties running side work and side work. Guys in the kitchen get raises and servers aren't compensated, but management says they can't afford to pay servers more. This is in NH. If this is legal to do, is there a way I could propose servers be compensated for doing expo and other jobs that cooks should be doing, and are definitely getting paid to be doing? They just don't, because they're told they don't have to by bad managers. I know there are other jobs. I can't just work another job due to other issues, currently working on untangling that web. Also, I was previously injured at this job. It changed my life. I didn't sue, I regret that. And they've done the bare minimum for me. Looking for your own experience on what you would say in this situation? I've worked at different restaurants over my 21 years of serving, and this wins for the most terrible management. Regarding my injury, I was headed out to my car to get a $20 to tip my bartender because we don't get our credit card tips the day we make them. First server job where I encountered this policy, we were required to tip out the bar 10% of our liquor sales and record it in our cash out. This is problematic because in this state it is illegal to coerce or persuade a paid employee to tip out another employee that is on the same payroll. I fell and snapped my foot 85% off, tibia exposed, fibula shattered. My life completely changed in that moment because I decided to follow an illegal rule placed by management. All my tips were on credit cards, so I was short cash to tip the bar and was supposed to write the tip on the day's report. I should have just skipped out and hit them up later, but it was a rule, so I thought I'd just get cash from the car quick. I have pics of the gross ankle biz if people are interested. After over a year of useless surgeries and PICC line antibiotics for a bone infection, blasted my ankle out right next to the dumpsters, and almost having to amputate, I transferred to Boston. An amazing surgeon saved the foot. The ankle was successfully fused, TT fusion, and despite the leg differential, and now chronic pain in compounding injuries and issues from original injury, I'm back to waitressing and working because I'm not disabled enough for state help. I'm also ADHD and autistic, so this is even more fun to navigate. Oh, and it took the ambulance 45 minutes to get to me. The restaurant I work at is 20 minutes from the state capital. I don't know how it took so long for an open wound bone fracture, but that was the beginning of a really terrible experience being neglected by Concord Hospital staff and those affiliated. Help. 2. For many years, I was the opening server, or bartender, for the weekend breakfast at a country club in a gated community for active adults. Technically, it was 65 and up, although up to 10% of the population could be 55 to 64, however. That was never an issue. I would say most were 70 and up. I never minded customers who were picky and complicated as long as they weren't jerks. I've learned how to put up with a lot. My goal was to give everyone exactly what they wanted as efficiently as possible, and since the majority of the clientele were regulars, it became fairly easy to remember everyone's particulars. I had a regular in his mid to late 70s who was a cranky old thing, but harmless. His ribbing was easy to ignore for the most part. I knew what he wanted, got it out, got my tip, and carried on. Hell, sometimes we even got along. He was either by himself, with a friend from outside the community, with his 2 sons, or the whole lot of them. Despite being a brunette, he always called me and most of the other women working Blondie. Our universal name, apparently. "Hey, Blondie, give me a top off. Hey, Blondie, I need some more ketchup." And he was just generally pessimistic, like someone had peed in his Cheerios. His sons always gave me apologetic looks. I would shrug or laugh something off, and they'd tip me a bit extra. He would tap his coffee cup if he needed a refill. Hey, I don't mind. Don't need to get in a whole conversation. I get in, get out, and on to checking the next table. I would always fill a cup about 3/4 of an inch from the top. Seemed reasonable, and no one had ever complained. These aren't large cups, but it was enough room to add cream and sugar, or to just not spill on yourself. After a year or two, that was no longer acceptable. He randomly started making comments about how I, or others, didn't know how to fill a cup up. I would usually smile, joke, and add a bit more. But one morning it was slammed. I was bartending with a fairly full bar, taking to-go orders on the phone, getting the golfers food or drinks after their first 9, and had 2 9-tops in addition to that. Of course, he wanted my section. It was busy, but I was sailing. Getting to work at 6:30 a.m. didn't always have me in the best mood, but one musters through. Fake it till you make it. But all 4 of them were there, and he had an audience to whom he could show off his condescending comments. His mighty prowess, cutting down a 25-year-old woman and putting her in her place. He already complained about my inability to pour a proper cup of coffee. I was going to greet a table, when all of a sudden he says, "Hey, Blondie," and taps on his cup. With a glorious grin, I filled it to the very tip-top, not even a drop spilling out. His son's eyes grew large. He tried to sputter, trying to ineloquently say that's not what he wanted. No, sir, I never know how to fill up a cup. Wouldn't want to have that. He grumbled, of course. And his son's eyes finally started twinkling. They finished their food, paid, and left. He never did complain again about my inability to refill his coffee. My revenge was minor, but the satisfaction was sweet. Got to get joy in that industry somewhere, right? 3. I worked at a popular coffee chain for almost 2 years in high school. I started at 15 and wasn't even allowed to pour the hot coffee until my 16th birthday, that I was scheduled to work on despite requesting it off. It was my first real job, and it definitely messed with my idea of what an employee should be. The male manager was easily the most sleazy guy I'd ever met. He had a pile of sexual harassment complaints and a list of women who had quit because of him. He would put his hands on my shoulders, back, and waist, to which other managers would do absolutely nothing about, other than telling me to punch him in the throat next time. I should mention that I was 16 and a staggering 5'1", compared to his 40 and double my size. I was also in charge of cleaning the men's washrooms. I had no problem with this, originally. I enjoyed cleaning most of the building anyway, and it usually wasn't too bad from what I'd heard. However, they wouldn't allow me to lock the doors, and it had to be checked every hour. Cleaning it took no longer than 10 minutes, full mop, wipe down, etc. But for some reason, despite having the doors blocked off and a sign on the door, I would have countless men whipping their dicks out in front of me because they couldn't wait long enough for me to wheel the mop and bucket out the door. I've always offered to leave for them, even if it means the process would take longer or other people would get in there. For some reason, they insisted that I stay and they'll be super quick. I'll bet they are. And they don't mind at all. This one time, a guy decided to use the urinal right beside the stall that I was cleaning. The bathroom was fairly narrow, and despite my pleas, he did not wait or even allow me to leave before unleashing his weapon. Being a 16-year-old girl essentially cornered by a man holding his hard bizzle, this was upsetting. I told my MOD about it, and he laughed, and once again denied me the privilege of locking the doors while cleaning. Whipping out your erection in a public washroom is a little strange, no? Well, it was not the last time, apparently, because not long after, some dude, or 3 of them, judging by the amount, decided to leave the essence of themselves all over the urinals. This happened a few hours before my shift, because by the time I got there, it was caked on there. I informed my manager, teary-eyed and gagging, that I had sprayed the filth with heavy-duty degreaser, and nothing would let out, and that I need someone else to clean it as it's unsanitary and I'm not trained or paid to do so. He told me to scrape it off. I said I felt degraded doing so. He got visibly upset and said, "I guess it'll just stay there then." I still wonder to this day if it was him. In the same restaurant, we had a girl who wouldn't wear deodorant, despite being asked several times by co-workers and management, and she honestly made the whole place smell like old garlic. I was sympathetic to her at first, thinking maybe she couldn't smell it or didn't realize or couldn't afford deodorant. But now I think she got excited from it, as she would talk about how she had sex before her shift and was letting the lube or bodily secretions dry up on her. Ew. My breaking point was when I requested time off to study for my exams. I was keen to study hard, as it could mean scholarships and early admission options. At first, they obliged because we had plenty of staff. Then they fired my coworker and gave all of his 36 hours in the weeks I requested to have off to me. I did pass all of my exams, but honestly the stress from working so long and being up so late brought me down a letter grade or two. Oh, and they had called me lazy for not wanting to work past the 36 hours of work, 30 hours of school, and 15 hours of studying in that week. All that said, I'm moving on from the food industry. I will forever have the utmost respect for anyone in the food industry. 4. I currently reside in the US and work for a company under the large corporation. This company owns many different franchises that earned a revenue of $11.9 billion last year. This being said, I started at this company in the beginning of July, super motivated. I hadn't been able to get a job for 7 months. Obviously, getting one, I was ecstatic. Slowly but surely, I kept getting harassed by a young woman who works there. Like clockwork, at the end of my shifts, she would be able to get at least 3/4 of the other employees to join in on the fun. 7 out of 8 co-workers, during a shift enjoying seeing me struggle so they can watch and laugh at me. Sure made me start dreading going to work. The first week I was out of training, I was baffled by how aggressive and rude she was. At the end of the night, I gave this food runner a $10 tip and proceeded to tell her, "Hey Ma, you're really good at your job. I respect that and I appreciate you. However, I don't like the way you were speaking to me and I would appreciate it if you stopped in the future." Ever since that day, this girl has got a chip on her shoulder. I really did try to ignore her, but it just kept getting worse and worse. It got to the point where I was constantly being asked privately if I was okay by my co-workers, because their intentional sabotaging of me was that obvious. Now, when I first started, I disclosed to my managers after the first panic attack I had there, which includes me telling my manager how rude and disrespectful this kid is, and she responded with saying, "Yeah, she's been a problem in the past, just ignore her." That I have PTSD and am bipolar. I was relieved to finally have a workplace where I could talk about my mental health diagnoses without being judged or stereotyped. Unfortunately, I was wrong. After that, any time I would try to address a situation that had gone on with me and another co-worker, like trying to cut me off or refusing to run my food, etc., they would gaslight me and say things, "Are you sure that's what happened? You're reading too much into that. So-and-so would never do that." This line of questions didn't start until after I divulged my mental health diagnosis. I honestly think they assumed they could just use me up and throw me out like every other working American. So it finally got to the point where I started questioning myself. Are you sure you heard that right? It's not in your head. I was super insecure in every choice I made and felt very incompetent not only at work at that point, but also at home. I also changed my anxiety meds twice since I started. I called the suicide hotline during the time this was going on. I had emergency same-day therapy sessions. I left my boyfriend because I was that ashamed of my inadequacy. I didn't want to ruin any chance of a relationship I could have. One weekend, a couple of weeks ago, she called me an old bitch. I asked the manager on duty if he would address this. Took him 20 minutes to leave the line. At the end of the night, she ran around saying, "Tip me, tip me." I gave her $1. When she realized what I gave her, she came back to me and shoved it into my hand and said, "I don't need this." I asked her if she wanted to talk about it. She said no and then proceeded to walk into the kitchen and tell everybody that she's not going to run anyone's food who doesn't tip her. I felt so defensive because everybody in the kitchen was listening to her slanderous rant. At this point, it was understood by the other team member she was talking about me. This behavior occurred so often, nobody had to question her who she was talking about. I said I don't tip people who make my job harder. Several other servers heard her egregious negative opinions of me. The following weekend I came into work, she refused to help me in any way, which would have been fine. I was very capable of taking care of my section without her drama. Her little goonies and herself tried to cut me off when I was getting beverages for my guests multiple times, on both sides of the soda machine. One time, the other employee that was tag-teaming with this chick said, "Well, maybe you should say excuse me," which was sarcasm because I've asked her to say excuse me multiple times since she intentionally kept bumping into me, while I was carrying X, Y, and Z over and over again. At that point, I had had it. I told the manager on duty I want to go home now because it was overwhelming dealing with all of it at once. Then all of my suspicions of their behavior were confirmed, because I heard the manager, who took 20 minutes to come out of the site the other weekend, clearly tell a bartender who had brought me up to respond to him, "Oh, you mean the one who doesn't matter?" Before that happened, the manager on duty that I asked to let me go home intimidated me intentionally not to file a complaint. She didn't let me. She said it would go to our store manager's boss. I said I guess I don't want to make waves. She said she wrote it down in the shift notes, so I contacted my store manager that night and sent her all the details just in case. I'd gotten the runaround from management so often. It was obvious they were attempting to pacify me by ignoring me or forcing me to go back to work, knowing it was unsafe for my mental health. I left an anonymous voicemail on the district manager's phone saying I was afraid of retaliation at my store. I don't want to leave my name. Can you call me back? He told me I had to go back to that hellhole until the investigation is over. The investigation I wasn't even made aware of was happening. When I accepted the fact that they weren't going to take me seriously, I put a formal inquiry into the EEOC, and also got a letter stating that the work environment I was being exposed to was hostile for my mental health from my psychiatrist. I just want them to acknowledge the several opportunities they have to improve and compensate me for this bull. What should I ask for in the arbitration hearing is what I'm saying. I'm firmly standing up for myself, but I don't know enough about this. Any advice that's well-intended is welcome. Also, I've reached out to lawyers. Nobody has taken my case this far, mostly because I have to get legal aid, and they're so backed up. I have a kid, and not a dollar to my name because I chose my dignity over money for the first time in my life. I'm gonna stand up for myself. But how? 5. I've been serving at one restaurant for over a year now, and up until the past 2 months I've loved it there. I was really close with the manager, the one I'll be talking about in this post, and she had a lot of trust in me. But that seems to all have gone away. For context, I recently picked up a second serving job on the weekends, because I wasn't making enough there, and we had way too many servers on for weekend shifts. I still work weekdays and Sunday nights, which I had no problem with until the manager started treating me terribly for getting another job. My newer job has a smaller amount of tables, and it's very busy, one of the more popular restaurants in my area. Since then, my serving style has changed, and at my older job, this one is much more slow, I'm not getting stressed at all, and I'm on top of everything with my section. One day, my manager came up to me asking if I'm ready for another table, and I didn't hear her, so I asked her to repeat herself. She starts raising her voice and saying, "Forget it, I'm seating you. You're on wait, and I can't have you acting this way." We had so many tables open and none of our servers were stressed, so there was no reason for us to be on a wait. Later on that same day, I'm in the kitchen, and one of our cooks asks me a question about a request I put in the order. He doesn't speak English very well, and as I'm explaining it to him, my manager starts asking me to run food that just came out of the window. I told her I needed a second so I could clarify an order. And she continued yelling at me to run food. About 15 minutes later, she pulls me aside and tells me, "I need you to actually have a sense of urgency. I need you to move 2 times faster than you do, and your brain to work 2 times faster than it does." This offended me a lot. And what makes it very worse is that I'm neurodivergent. and I've just recently gotten diagnosed with a few disorders that she is well aware of, and I've expressed it to her multiple times. When I try to talk to her about everything and what led her to say this to me, she storms off and never lets me talk to her about it again. This past week I was sick, and I called out because I had a fever and a few other symptoms. I couldn't contact her for the life of me. When I called the restaurant, the workers answering would tell her I'm on the phone. And then I would be on hold for 15 minutes or more, and at that point I'm just hanging up. I ended up texting her, both her number and our scheduling app, and she didn't respond until minutes before my shift started. I came back to work a few days later and my voice was hoarse from being sick, but it didn't bother me enough to not work. The next day I ended up losing my voice, and when I tried contacting her she did the same thing, where she entirely ignores me and leaves me on hold. She ended up sending me a text after hours of trying to reach her that said, "I guess I'll figure it out again." I've lost my voice before, and they've never helped me by giving me positions where I'm not speaking, and when I offered to use whiteboards to talk, they denied it immediately. While I understand it's unprofessional, my other job let me do this while also making tags for me to wear saying I lost my voice, and people tipped me more seeing how much I was trying. Neither of these restaurants are nice or fine dining. They're both just casual sit-down restaurants. Anyway, that's all with my rant. There's more small things that I didn't put in here. It's just these occasions really upset me. My other job has agreed to give me a few more hours, so I'm trying to decide if I want to put in a 2 weeks or not. I could very well be overreacting, but it's very frustrating to be put down the way I am when I know I'm not doing anything wrong. Hellfreezer's note. Check to see what the rules are in your state, what was in your contract as to whether or not you have to give 2 weeks notice. If you're not required to do so at the other restaurant, just leave. You don't owe them anything. They're really going out of their way to show you disrespect. That manager is... Though the manager, they're not the owner, and they're taking the fact that you've chosen to work at another restaurant because they're not paying you enough ridiculously personally. If there's anyone over them you can report them to, you should certainly do that. At no point in a workplace, whether it's a fellow employee or a manager, doesn't matter who, or even a customer, should anyone be yelling at you. If they have to yell to get their point across, the point isn't worth getting across in the first place. I hope you'll be out of there soon, and that you're treated much better in your new job. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates, episode 258. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and why not support me on my Patreon page, which is linked for you in the description. Right, no other business today, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Pasta, do you like to over-sauce it, or do you just like to drizzle a little bit on top? I'm aware that can sometimes be a cultural preference. Personally, I like as much sauce as is reasonably possible with pasta. Not enough that you'd call it a soup, but enough that everything is coated and it's very, very yummy. Especially if it's like mac and cheese, or really whatever kind of pasta with cheese. I'm not super fussy when it comes to that kind of thing. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.